Hi, and welcome to Craft Camp. I'm Emily, and today we are going to be learning how to use a mini loom to make these coasters. All right, let's get started. There are a few different ways that you can do a weaving like this, but this is how I'm going to do it today. So I've got a piece of cardboard. This is about 5 by 5.5 inches. I've got a pair of scissors. I'll be using this blue embroidery floss in the color 932. You could also use a twine or another thin string. And I'll be using macrame cord to do the weaving itself. Again, you can use yarn or anything that's got a little bit more bulk to it. You could even use something skinny if you wanted to be sitting there for a while, but we're going to be using macrame cord to get that nice plushy texture. I have a yarn needle over here that I'll be using to do the actual weaving. If you don't have a yarn needle on hand, I'll show you how to make one with a piece of wire. So this is an 18 gauge piece of wire, and this has a paper coating, but if you have any wire around that's got a little bit of sturdiness to it, it should work just fine. And I'm going to cut this down maybe about to, let's see what this one is. This one's probably about 5 inches. I'm gonna do a little bit more than that. And I've got this shorter piece now, and I'm going to take my pliers and I'm just going to make a little loop here at the end. And I've got quite a bit of tail, and I'll show you why here in a second. So I've got my loop, just gonna pinch it so it's not too wide. Don't worry if you tear the paper, if you're using a paper coated wire, will be just fine. And now I've got the tail of the end right in line with the rest of our makeshift needle. And I'm just going to cover that with tape so it doesn't get stuck on any of our threads as we weave. So we'll start at the top and we're just gonna wind that down, covering the tail so that it doesn't get stuck. We don't wanna get too bulky, so I'm not gonna do too much tape here. And this should be good to go. And this is actually what I used when I did my first weave, my practice weave, and I liked it quite a lot because I could kind of bend the end and scoop as I go. So we'll see how it goes today with the yarn needle. I haven't used one of these before, but I think it should be pretty good. Next up, we are going to make our mini loom out of cardboard, and this is very easy. I've got 2 pieces of cardboard here, and they're about 5 inches by 5.5 inches. This one, you can see the lines of the cardboard are going this direction. And on this one, the lines of the cardboard are going this direction, so it's a little shorter. And this will just change the size of the weave that we can do. On this one, it's going to be a little shorter, and on this one, I can get a little bit more length, but it won't be quite as wide. So I can decide which size I want, and again, you can cut your mini loom to any size you want. Just think about what you would like to make before you cut your cardboard. I'm going to do the longer one this time because last time I used these shorter ones, so I want to see the difference. And you can take a look at this and you'll see the natural grooves in your cardboard. And this is important. I'm going to use those grooves to measure out the width of the gaps I'm going to put in my loom. So I'm going to start here and I'm going to cut just a little notch right in between the 2 lines of the cardboard. We're just going to do this all the way across. And this is just a really easy way to measure. And if you don't want to do this or your cardboard doesn't have grooves, you're using chipboard, you can just use a ruler and mark out about every centimeter and just cut this. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect, but just get it about as close as you can. And you'll notice I didn't go all the way to the edge. I left a little bit of room. Boop. Now that I've got this side done, I'm just going to flip it over all the way and we're going to do the opposite side. Now I've got the loom all notched up and I'm ready to start with my embroidery floss. So I'm going to pull a pretty long string of this to get started. We'll just leave it on there. And I'm going to start from the back side, again leaving quite a bit of extra just so I can tie the knot at the end. And we're going to start on one side, turn it over, bring it straight down, creating this straight line. Make sure you've got a good amount of tension, so hold the loose end tightly in your hand as you go. And then let's go over to the next notch, bring it down, over to the next notch, and repeat until you're all the way at the end. Now that I've got my embroidery floss threaded all the way through, I'm going to just turn it over. I'll pull this piece back around and I'm going to cut this and we're just going to tie these together. You can also tape it if you'd prefer, but I find that tying it gives a little bit more tension as I work. I've got it tied on the back and I'm just going to trim these a little bit shorter just so they're not in the way and flip it over to the side we'll be working on. Next up, you'll want to grab your yarn or your macrame cord and your yarn needle, whether you're using a real yarn needle or one made from wire. You will need to cut it off of the spool, so I'm going to take quite a bit out, and we're going to want more than we think we need because we don't want to run out partway through. If you do run out partway through, you can keep going, or you can switch colors and get patterns on here, but today we're just going to start with the one color so we can learn how to do this the right way. All right, now I've got a pile of macrame cord, and I'm just going to cut this, and then from there we'll put it in our yarn needle. Now that I've got my yarn needle threaded, I'm going to take a little piece of tape and just tape it here on the end. And I've got the tail over here, and I'm just taping it so that it won't come loose. Once around should be enough. Then I'm going to cut this tail. All right, now we are ready to start weaving. It doesn't matter which direction you start from. I'm going to start from right to left since I'm right-handed, but you can start from left to right also. I'm going to first go under, and then over, under, over, under, over. And we'll just repeat this all the way down the line. If I skewer my embroidery floss, I can just pick it up. Make sure that I don't go through the threads. We want to go all the way underneath. And then once I get to the end, I'm going to pull this all the way through. And the first time is always the trickiest because we haven't got any gaps built in from our weaving. So just kind of gently tug it through. It'll get easier from here. And we're going to pull this all the way to the end. And I'm just going to leave a tail at the end. So we're going to leave about this much at the end, and then we're going to push this all the way down. If you're using a thinner cord or a yarn, you can use a fork and just gently pull it down. With this thick macrame cord, it's pretty easy to do with our fingers. All right, we've got the first one in. Now let's go in for our second. This time we're going to go over under, doing the opposite pattern as last time. I went ahead and took the tape off because it kept snagging as I was working. I might put it back on once I have a little bit more. Now I've got my second one pulled through. I'm just going to slide it down. I don't want to pull too hard. One thing when you're doing the weaving is you want to try to keep these lines on the outside as straight as possible. If you pull them too tight, it'll start to bow in, and that will affect the final result. So we want to keep these pretty loose here on the ends, just curving right around and coming over to the other side. And I'm going to push it down, and then we're going back the other way. And you can see this time it's a lot easier now that I've got some bulk there at the bottom. We've got our third row done, and I'm just going to continue repeating the process. If you're using macrame cord or something else that tends to get a little twisted up, you'll notice here it's kind of twisting up as I pull it through. And if I pull this tight, it's going to add a lot more tension to this side than the previous ones. So I'm going to just gently untwist it a little bit before I pull it any tighter. You can see it uncurved, and now it will lay in there a lot better, and we'll just keep going. Now I've got this to about the shape that I want. It's about a square, so I'm going to cut the end, cut this tail. Let's give ourselves a little bit of room to work with. And there we go. Now I'm going to flip it over on the back side, and we're going to cut all of these. We're going to go right down the middle. And we're gonna just do one side at a time. I learned the hard way the first time I did this, that you don't want to take the whole thing off at once. You just want to start with one side and unpop them as you go. So I popped off two, and I'm just going to tie a little knot here at the bottom. And if you want to keep your needle handy, you can use that to make sure your knots are nice and close. So I've got my loop, and I'm just going to put my needle right up at the base, and we'll just pull it tight. Now we'll go over to the next two, and we'll repeat this all the way across. This is one of the more tedious parts of this process, but it makes everything worth it. Something important to remember is you want to have an even number of notches cut as you go across. I didn't double check that and I ended up with an odd number, so at the end here I have 3 strings that I had to tie together instead of 2. That's okay, we're all learning, but just when you do this yourself, remember, keep them even. All right, now I've gone ahead and taken it fully off the cardboard, and you can see we've got our cute little mat here, almost ready to go, but we've still got some tails to deal with. And for your threads on this side, you can go ahead and just cut them to an even length, whatever kind of a look you want. If you want them a little shorter, or if you want some tassels, you can just cut them and then spread out the threads to get that nice poofy look, or you can cut them really short, up to you. I just want them to be even. To hide the ends, I'm going to go ahead and weave it back through. So I've already got the end on my needle, and I'm just going to go down into this little side area, and we're going to go under and over, just like we did with our thread. Okay, for this other side, I'm going to try something a little different, and I'm just going to tape our piece and tape our needle together. And I'm hoping that this will be a little less bulky when I pull it through, so I don't get quite as much of this pouching happening. If you have a better method of doing this, please let me know. I'm still learning, and we're all learning together. So I'm going to go under our last loop here. I do want to make sure that I'm not pulling any of these little strings apart because it will get stuck. And this method does seem to be working slightly better than the other way. It's not quite as bulky when I pull it through. Now that we've got our ends tucked away, I'm just going to fluff everything out to make it nice and poofy and even. Just kind of tug on the little ends here. And then I'm going to just pop it over here, and I'll take my needle and I'm going to separate out these strands so that we get little tassels. And here we have it, our finished result. And beside it, you can see my first attempt, and I've gotten slightly better, probably still need a little bit of practice, but we're getting there. And I hope you really enjoyed this process. I think that it's ready to go. You can find all of the tools and materials for making this in our shop at feltpaperscissors.com. Cheers!